It all began in high school, where Amelia and I first crossed paths during our sophomore year. She wasn't like the other girls, loud or attention-seeking, but rather quiet, reserved, almost as if she carried a secret world within her. When she finally opened up, though, it was like watching fireworks explode across the night sky. Her dreams were endless, vivid, and intoxicating. She wanted to work in publishing, to live in a sprawling city surrounded by books, and maybe even write one herself someday. I fell for her instantly, not just because of her ambition but because of how fiercely alive she seemed when she talked about her future. But there was always an invisible wall between us, a barrier erected by Amelia's family. From the moment they found out about me, their disdain was palpable. They didn't hide their disapproval of my working-class background or my job fixing pipes. To them, I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Their words stung more than I cared to admit, but what really broke something inside me happened on one fateful visit to Amelia's house. I'll never forget that day. It started innocently enough. I had gone over to help Amelia study for an upcoming exam. Her parents weren't home, so we decided to take a break and explore the living room, which was filled with artifacts from their travels. One piece stood out, a delicate porcelain vase perched precariously on a shelf. It looked ancient, fragile, and impossibly valuable. Amelia warned me not to touch it, laughing nervously as she said, "That thing is practically sacred to my mom." Of course, fate has a cruel sense of humor. As I reached for a book nearby, my elbow brushed against the edge of the shelf. The vase wobbled once, twice, and then crashed to the floor in slow motion, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. Time froze. My heart sank as I stared at the wreckage, knowing full well this wasn't just any broken object, it was a symbol of everything her parents treasured. Amelia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. For a moment, neither of us spoke, then panic set in. We scrambled to clean up the mess, hoping against hope that no one would notice. But deep down, I knew it was futile. That vase wasn't just going to disappear, and neither was the fallout. When Amelia's parents returned home later that evening, the tension was suffocating. Her mother walked straight to the empty spot on the shelf, her face draining of color. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Amelia tried to explain, stumbling over her words, but her father silenced her with a single glare before turning his cold eyes on me. "You," he spat, pointing an accusatory finger. "This is why people like you shouldn't get too close to someone like Amelia." The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. People like me. What did that even mean? Someone who worked hard every day to build something meaningful. Someone who loved their daughter unconditionally. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the weight of their judgment pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. Instead, I promised to make things right. I offered to pay for the vase, to find an expert who could restore it, anything to prove I wasn't the reckless, careless person they thought I was. But nothing I said mattered. In their eyes, I was already guilty not just of breaking a priceless heirloom, but of daring to dream I could belong in their world. Amelia tried to stand by me, but the pressure mounted relentlessly. Her parents bombarded her with lectures, telling her I'd only hold her back, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I didn't deserve her brilliance. Every conversation became a battle, every argument another crack in the foundation of our relationship. And while Amelia swore she wouldn't let them come between us, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. Looking back now, I realized that vase was more than just a casualty of clumsiness, it was the beginning of the end. It planted the seed of insecurity in Amelia's mind, a seed that Liz would later exploit to tear us apart completely. But at the time, all I could think about was how desperately I wanted to fix things, to prove to everyone including myself that I was worthy of Amelia's love. Little did I know, some cracks run too deep to mend. At first glance, Liz seemed harmless enough, a friendly face in the office who occasionally complimented Amelia on her work ethic or offered advice during stressful deadlines. But beneath that polished exterior lay a calculating manipulator, someone who thrived on sowing discord and exploiting vulnerabilities. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. She'd drop comments here and there about me, framing them as casual observations but laced with insinuations designed to plant seeds of doubt in Amelia's mind. One day, while they were grabbing coffee together, Liz leaned back in her chair, stirring her latte absent-mindedly before saying, "You know, it's admirable how supportive your boyfriend is. Most guys wouldn't be okay with their girlfriends chasing such big dreams. Still, doesn't it bother you sometimes? Like, what if he's doing all this because he feels obligated?" Her tone was light, almost playful, but the words lingered long after the conversation ended. Amelia brushed it off at first, laughing it away as Liz being overly dramatic. But deep down, those words burrowed into her subconscious like termites gnawing at the foundation of our relationship. Liz didn't stop there. Over time, she began spreading rumors around the office, cleverly disguised as innocent gossip. "Did you hear?" she'd whisper to one coworker, loud enough for others to overhear. "Amelia's boyfriend practically controls her finances. He sends her money every month, but honestly, I think it's just his way of keeping her tied to him." Another time, she casually mentioned to another colleague, "I don't know, something about him just seems off. Have you noticed how he never lets her make decisions without checking with him first?" These whispers reached Amelia eventually, twisted and exaggerated by the grapevine until even she couldn't ignore them. At first, she tried to defend me, insisting that Liz didn't understand the dynamics of our relationship. But the more she heard these stories, the harder it became to dismiss them entirely. Doubts crept in, small at first, but persistent like cracks forming in glass under pressure. Then came the incident that truly shattered the fragile trust between us. One evening, Amelia and Liz were scrolling through social media together when Liz suddenly gasped, feigning surprise. "Oh my God, Amelia, look at this," she exclaimed, turning the phone toward Amelia. On the screen was an old photo from a party I'd attended months ago. In it, I was standing next to Sarah, my childhood best friend, both of us laughing and holding drinks. The caption read, "Good times with good company." To anyone else, it would have been an innocuous snapshot, a moment frozen in time, nothing more. But Liz knew exactly what buttons to press. "Who's this girl?" she asked innocently, tilting her head. "She looks awfully close to you. Do you know her?" Amelia stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. I had told her about Sarah countless times. We'd grown up together, shared everything from scraped knees to heartbreaks. Yet, seeing that image now, framed by Liz's calculated curiosity, something shifted in Amelia's eyes. "She's just a friend," Amelia said stiffly, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. Liz nodded sympathetically, pretending to console her. "Of course, she's probably just a friend. But still, why does he have pictures like this online? Doesn't it seem weird to you?" Amelia didn't respond immediately, but the seed of suspicion had already taken root. That night, she called me, her voice trembling as she asked, "Who was that girl in the picture Liz showed me? Why didn't you tell me about her?" I explained patiently, reminding her that Sarah was my best friend since childhood and that the photo was taken during a group outing. But no matter how many reassurances I gave, the damage was done. Every smile captured in that photo, every laugh frozen in time, became evidence in Amelia's mind of some hidden betrayal. She began questioning things I said and did, scrutinizing my actions for signs of dishonesty. A missed call became proof of infidelity. A late-night text to Sarah became grounds for suspicion. What made it worse was that Liz wasn't content with merely planting doubts, she actively sought to exacerbate them. During lunch breaks, she'd casually mention how convenient it was that I worked in plumbing, implying that it allowed me to avoid accountability. "It's not like anyone can track where he goes or what he does," she'd say with a shrug. "He could easily meet up with whoever whenever he wants." Each word was a dagger, slicing deeper into the fabric of our relationship. The breaking point came when Amelia confronted me one evening, tears streaming down her face. "Why do you always talk to her?" she demanded, referring to Sarah. "Why are you so secretive about her? Is there something you're not telling me?" I tried to reason with her, to remind her of the years we'd spent building trust and love. But her resolve hardened, fueled by Liz's relentless manipulation. For the first time, I saw the shadow of doubt clouding her judgment, and I realized how far Liz had succeeded in driving a wedge between us. Looking back now, I see Liz for what she truly was, a master manipulator who thrived on chaos. She didn't care about Amelia's happiness or mine. Her only goal was to destroy what we had and step into the void left behind. And for a while, it seemed like she might succeed. The night that changed everything began with a mix of anticipation and dread, though I didn't realize it at the time. It was supposed to be the most important moment of my life, a culmination of years spent building something meaningful with Amelia. I had planned every detail meticulously, from the restaurant to the ring box itself. The ring wasn't just an ordinary piece of jewelry. It symbolized everything we'd been through together. Its design incorporated both our birthstones, forming a heart in the center, surrounded by small diamonds that represented the future we would build: children, adventures, a lifetime of shared memories. Even the custom-made box, with its playful yes and no buttons, reflected who we were as a couple, equal parts cheesy and heartfelt. I picked Amelia up that evening, her emerald dress shimmering under the dim streetlights. She looked breathtaking, as she always did, but there was something off about her demeanor. Her laughter felt forced, her smiles fleeting, like shadows passing across the moon. At first, I chalked it up to stress from work or fatigue, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Still, I pushed forward, determined to make this night unforgettable for better or worse. We arrived at the cozy Italian bistro I'd chosen for the occasion. The ambience was perfect, soft candlelight flickering on crisp white tablecloths, the hum of quiet conversation blending seamlessly with the gentle strumming of a guitarist in the corner. I'd reserved a secluded table near the window, where I imagined the city lights would serve as a backdrop to the proposal. For the first half of dinner, things seemed almost normal. We talked about her recent promotion, my expanding plumbing business, and other mundane details of life. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, unspoken yet palpable. Then, halfway through the meal, it happened. Just as I reached into my pocket to retrieve the ring box, Amelia cleared her throat. My hand froze mid-motion, fingers brushing against the velvet casing. Something in her tone sent a chill racing down my spine. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice steady but distant, like she was reciting lines rehearsed countless times in her head. My stomach clenched, but I nodded, forcing myself to remain calm. "Sure," I replied, though my voice betrayed a slight tremor. She avoided my gaze, staring instead at her plate as if searching for answers among the remnants of pasta. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," each word landed like a hammer blow. "And I don't think this is working anymore. I feel like we've grown apart, and honestly..." She hesitated, biting her lip before continuing. "Liz says maybe I'm holding myself back. Maybe I deserve someone more polished." The air left my lungs in one sharp exhale. Polished. That word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. All those years of supporting her dreams, sacrificing my own comfort to ensure hers, and now she reduced me to some rough-edged relic unworthy of her ambition. Before I could respond, she added, "It's not just Liz, it's me too. I need space to figure out what I really want." I sat there, stunned, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a leaden blanket. This was the woman I'd loved since high school, the person I envisioned spending the rest of my life with, and here she was, casually dismantling everything we'd built. With trembling hands, I pulled the ring box from my pocket, gripping it tightly enough to leave imprints on my palm. I placed it on the table between us, still unopened. "Do you see this?" I asked, my voice low but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. "This is the ring I was going to give you tonight. I was going to ask you to marry me, to spend your life with me." But clearly, I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You don't deserve it." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Standing abruptly, I shoved the box back into my pocket and grabbed my jacket. As I turned to leave, she called out, pleading for me to stay, but I ignored her. I needed to get out of there, to breathe, to think, to process the wreckage of what had once been my future. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap, grounding me momentarily. But as I walked toward my car, panic set in. In my haste to escape, I realized I'd left the ring box behind. Dread pooled in my stomach as I retraced my steps, praying no one had noticed. When I peeked inside the restaurant, what I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. There was Amelia, sitting at the same table where I'd planned to propose, but she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize sat beside her, his arm draped possessively around her waist. They were laughing, leaning into each other as if they'd known each other for years. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife further, he leaned in and kissed her right there, in plain view. My vision blurred with rage and disbelief. How could she? How could she do this so soon after breaking my heart? Forcing myself to move, I slipped silently back into the restaurant, retrieved the box without drawing attention, and fled into the night. The drive home was a blur of anger, betrayal, and gut-wrenching pain. Every mile felt heavier than the last, each turn taking me further away from the life I thought I'd have. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew one thing for certain: Amelia wasn't the woman I thought she was, and neither was I the man who would beg her to come back. The breakup with Amelia left me in a state of emotional turmoil, but life had other plans to test my resilience. Barely 2 weeks after that fateful night at the restaurant, I began feeling unwell, fatigue gnawing at my bones, dizziness clouding my mind, and an inexplicable weakness that made even simple tasks feel Herculean. At first, I dismissed it as stress. After all, losing someone you've loved for nearly a decade isn't exactly a walk in the park. But when I nearly collapsed while fixing a client's water heater, I knew something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train, a rare condition requiring immediate surgery. The doctors assured me it wasn't life-threatening, but recovery would be long and grueling. As they explained the procedure, my thoughts spiraled, not out of fear for my health, but because of how this revelation might change things. What if Amelia found out? Would she see me as weak, broken, or worse, pity me? And what about Liz? That manipulative snake would undoubtedly twist this into another weapon against me. No, I decided then and there to keep it hidden from everyone. This was my battle, not theirs. The day of the surgery arrived, and as I lay on the operating table, staring up at the sterile lights above, I couldn't help but reflect on how drastically my life had changed in such a short span. Just months ago, I was planning a future with Amelia, envisioning children, adventures, and shared dreams. Now, here I was alone, fighting for my health while the woman I once called my soulmate was probably wrapped around some stranger's arm. The irony stung more than any incision ever could. When I woke up post-surgery, groggy and disoriented, the last person I expected to see sitting by my bedside was Liz. She looked eerily calm, almost maternal, as though she belonged there. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating, a side effect of the anesthesia, perhaps. But no, it was really her, perched uncomfortably close, clutching a bouquet of flowers that seemed more like a prop than a genuine gesture. "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're okay," she cooed, leaning forward as if we were old friends or worse, something more intimate. Her voice dripped with faux concern, each word laced with insincerity. "I heard you were in the hospital, and I just had to come see you." My throat was too dry to respond immediately, so I simply croaked, "What are you doing here?" She gave me one of those practiced smiles, the kind designed to disarm and deceive. "You didn't think I'd ignore something like this, did you? We may not have always seen eye to eye, but I care about you, you know." Every syllable felt like a slap to the face. Care about me. This was the same woman who had spent months tearing apart my relationship with Amelia, planting seeds of doubt, and painting me as inadequate. Yet here she was, pretending to be my guardian angel. My stomach churned with disgust, but I lacked the energy to confront her. Instead, I closed my eyes, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. Of course, Liz being Liz, she didn't. As I drifted in and out of consciousness over the next few hours, I caught glimpses of her snapping photos on her phone. At first, I assumed she was documenting her good deed for social media clout, but the malicious glint in her eyes told a darker story. It wasn't until later that evening, when I finally regained enough strength to scroll through Instagram, that I discovered the extent of her cruelty. There it was, a photo of me lying in the hospital bed, pale and frail, hooked up to machines, with the caption, "When the hero also has his moments of falling. Guess even pipes need fixing sometimes." The comments section was a cesspool of mockery and snarky remarks, many of which came from people I didn't even know. Some praised Liz for her wit, while others speculated about my supposed decline. One comment stood out: "Maybe now he'll realize he's not cut out for anything serious." Reading those words felt like being punched in the gut. Here I was, vulnerable and recovering from surgery, and Liz had turned my pain into fodder for her own twisted amusement. Worse still, I couldn't shake the thought that Amelia might see this post. If she hadn't already moved on completely, this would only reinforce every negative perception Liz had planted in her mind, that I was unreliable, unworthy, and ultimately replaceable. But anger quickly gave way to resolve. Lying there, surrounded by the sterile hum of medical equipment, I realized Liz's actions weren't just petty, they were calculated. She wanted to humiliate me, to strip away whatever dignity I had left. And yet, in her arrogance, she underestimated me. Every insult, every jab, only fueled my determination to rise above it all. I vowed then and there that I wouldn't let her or anyone else define me. By the time I was discharged, I had formulated a plan. Recovery wouldn't just be about healing physically, it would be about reclaiming control. Liz thought she had won, but little did she know, she had set the stage for her own downfall. And I intended to make sure she regretted every move she'd made. After the fallout with Amelia and Liz, I made a promise to myself: I wouldn't let them or anyone like them control my life ever again. But walking away wasn't enough. Not this time. This wasn't just about closure, it was about justice. For months, Liz had manipulated Amelia, poisoned our relationship, and ultimately destroyed everything we built together. She didn't deserve to get off scot-free while I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered heart. So, I decided to fight back, not with anger or impulsiveness but with precision. The first step in my plan came when I hired a private investigator named Marcus. He was recommended by one of my friends who swore by his discretion and efficiency. At first, I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted him to uncover. All I knew was that Liz wasn't as perfect as she pretended to be. People like her always leave trails they're too arrogant to cover their tracks completely. And Marcus delivered far beyond my expectations. Within weeks, he unearthed a series of damning revelations about Liz's behavior at work. It turned out she'd been siphoning company funds for personal use, booking lavish vacations under the guise of business trips, and charging expensive dinners to the company card. One particularly incriminating piece of evidence showed her using the company account to buy designer handbags worth thousands of dollars during a supposed team-building retreat. Even worse, she'd been stealing credit for other employees' ideas, taking sole ownership of projects she barely contributed to. The more Marcus dug, the clearer it became. Liz wasn't just toxic in her personal relationships, she was corrupt professionally as well. Armed with this information, I crafted my next move carefully. Ignoring Liz's constant texts and calls wasn't satisfying anymore. I needed her to feel the same humiliation she inflicted on me, the slow unraveling of her carefully constructed facade. So, I set the stage for our final confrontation. I arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe near her office, somewhere neutral where no one would recognize us. When she arrived, she looked nervous but tried to mask it with her usual charm. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she wore an outfit that screamed confidence. But I could see through the act. Beneath the polished exterior lay someone desperate to regain control. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been thinking about everything, and I realize now how wrong I was. About you, about Amelia. I'm so sorry." She reached across the table, attempting to take my hand, but I pulled away instinctively. Her apology sounded rehearsed, almost mechanical, like lines from a script she'd memorized. Still, I let her continue, watching as tears welled up in her eyes. "I never meant for things to go this far," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I thought I was helping Amelia, guiding her towards something better. But I see now that I only made things worse for both of you. Please, give me another chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her, almost. But then I remembered every cruel comment, every manipulative scheme, every tear Amelia shed because of her interference. My resolve hardened instantly. You want forgiveness? I asked coldly, pulling out a folder from my bag. Inside were copies of all the documents Marcus had gathered: bank statements, receipts, emails detailing her misconduct. I slid them across the table toward her, watching as her expression shifted from confusion to panic. What is this? She whispered, flipping through the pages. Her hands shook violently as she realized the extent of what I knew. This, I said, leaning forward, is proof of everything you've done. The stolen funds, the lies, the sabotage, not just to me and Amelia, but to your colleagues, your company, everyone around you. You thought you were untouchable, didn't you? Her face drained of color, and she slumped back in her chair, visibly defeated. You can't show these to anyone, she pleaded, her voice cracking. If Amelia sees this, if my boss finds out. Oh, don't worry, I interrupted, cutting her off mid-sentence. They already have. Every single document has been sent to the right people. Amelia, your manager, HR. You won't be able to talk your way out of this one. Liz stared at me, wide-eyed and speechless. For once, she had nothing to say. No clever excuses, no manipulative tactics, just raw and filtered fear. Then, as if realizing she still had one last card to play, she grabbed her phone and dialed Amelia's number. Help me, she cried into the receiver, her voice breaking. He's trying to ruin me, please. You have to believe me, I didn't mean any of it. But Amelia didn't respond the way Liz hoped. From what I later heard, Amelia hung up immediately, refusing to listen to her pleas. Their friendship, already fractured beyond repair, crumbled entirely in that moment. Liz had finally crossed the line, and there was no coming back. As I walked away from the cafe, leaving Liz behind in a state of sheer desperation, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Revenge wasn't something I'd ever sought before, but seeing her unravel gave me a sense of vindication. Justice, it seemed, had a way of finding its own path. The fallout between Amelia and Liz was inevitable, but no one could have predicted the explosive confrontation that unfolded at their office. It began innocently enough, or so it seemed. Amelia had walked into the break room to grab a cup of coffee when she spotted Liz scrolling through her phone with a smug grin plastered across her face. Something about Liz's demeanor set Amelia on edge, and before she could stop herself, she blurted out, "Why did you do it? Why did you send him those messages?" Liz froze, her fingers hovering over the screen as if caught mid-crime. For a split second, there was silence, a tense, suffocating void that hung heavy in the air. Then Liz recovered, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone laced with faux confusion. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Amelia snapped, slamming her mug onto the counter. "The texts, the voicemails. You thought you could swoop in after ruining everything and act like nothing happened." Liz stood up slowly, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some innocent victim here. You were the one who dumped him, remember? And now you're mad because I tried to comfort him. That's rich. Comfort him." Amelia hissed, her voice rising. "You didn't comfort him, Liz. You manipulated him, just like you manipulated me. You've been scheming this whole time, haven't you? Trying to tear us apart so you could have him for yourself." By now, other employees had started gathering around, drawn by the escalating argument. Some whispered behind their hands, while others openly gawked, eager to witness the drama unfold. The tension crackled like electricity, each word cutting deeper than the last. "I never forced you to do anything," Liz shot back, her voice shrill and defensive. "If you were stupid enough to listen to me, that's on you, not me." That was the tipping point. Amelia lunged forward, her hands clawing at Liz's pristine blouse. Liz stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in the process. Chaos erupted as the two women grappled with each other, their screams echoing through the office. Employees scrambled to intervene, but neither Amelia nor Liz showed any signs of backing down. Fists flew, hair was pulled, and insults hurled like daggers. Security arrived moments later, dragging the two women apart as they continued to shout obscenities at each other. By the time they were escorted out of the building, both were disheveled. Amelia's mascara streaked down her cheeks, and Liz's perfectly styled hair was a tangled mess. The entire scene was captured on someone's phone and uploaded to social media within minutes. Within hours, the video went viral, sparking outrage and ridicule across platforms. Comments flooded in, ranging from mockery to calls for accountability. Neither woman emerged unscathed. Their reputations were tarnished beyond repair. The aftermath was devastating. Both Amelia and Liz were fired immediately, their behavior deemed unacceptable by company standards. But while Liz retreated into denial, refusing to take responsibility for her actions, Amelia spiraled into a deep depression. Losing her job was bad enough, but seeing the public humiliation play out online felt like a death sentence. She stopped answering calls from friends and avoided leaving her apartment altogether. Her once bright eyes dulled, replaced by hollow shadows of regret and despair. Desperate to salvage what little remained of her life, Amelia turned to therapy, hoping to untangle the web of guilt and shame that consumed her. Yet even in her darkest moments, thoughts of me haunted her. She couldn't shake the image of my cold indifference during our final encounter, the way I'd shut her out without hesitation. Determined to make amends, she bombarded me with calls, texts, and emails. When those failed, she resorted to handwritten letters, pouring her heart onto paper in an attempt to reach me. Please, one letter read, I know I made mistakes, terrible ones. But I see now how wrong I was to let Liz influence me. I miss you more than words can express. Can we start over? Please give me another chance. Each plea landed unanswered in the void of my inbox or mailbox. I didn't respond, not because I enjoyed watching her suffer, but because I knew reopening old wounds would only prolong the pain. Amelia had chosen her path, and Liz had orchestrated the chaos that followed. They deserved each other, and I wanted no part of it. As weeks turned into months, Amelia's desperation grew. She showed up at my door unannounced, her appearance a far cry from the polished woman I once knew. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes swollen from crying. Liz poisoned everything, she sobbed, collapsing onto the porch steps. She made me doubt you, doubt us. I was blind, and now I've lost everything. For a moment, I considered comforting her, offering some semblance of closure. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd allowed Liz to destroy what we had without fighting for us. My resolve hardened. Without a word, I closed the door, leaving her alone with her remorse. After everything that had happened with Amelia and Liz, I swore to myself I'd never let anyone else have that kind of power over me again. My life became a series of calculated steps, expanding my plumbing business, hiring new employees, and focusing on personal growth. It wasn't just about moving forward, it was about rebuilding the pieces of myself they tried so hard to break. But even as my professional life flourished, there was still an emptiness in my personal world, a cautious distance I kept from everyone around me. Love felt like a gamble I couldn't afford to take. That changed when Sarah walked into my life, or rather, when I walked into hers. She was a talented interior designer who had been recommended by one of my clients for a project at the new branch location. From the moment we met, she struck me as someone different, not because of her sharp eye for design or her confident demeanor, but because of how effortlessly genuine she seemed. While other people often judged me based on what I did for a living, Sarah didn't bat an eyelash. Instead, she complimented my work ethic, saying things like, "There's something admirable about building something with your own hands." At first, I kept her at arm's length. The scars from my past relationships were still fresh, and I couldn't risk letting another person in only to be blindsided again. But Sarah wasn't deterred. She showed up to meetings prepared, asked thoughtful questions, and made small gestures that spoke volumes, like bringing coffee when she knew I'd been swamped or texting to check in after hearing about a particularly stressful day. Slowly but surely, she chipped away at the walls I'd built, proving time and time again that she wasn't going anywhere. One evening, after months of working together, we found ourselves alone in the newly renovated office space. The sunset cast golden hues across the room, highlighting the intricate details of her designs. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she turned to me, her expression soft but resolute. "You don't have to keep pushing me away," she said gently. "I'm not here because I feel sorry for you or because I think you need fixing. I'm here because I see you the real you and I like what I see." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away years of self-doubt and fear. For the first time since Amelia, I allowed myself to believe that maybe happiness wasn't out of reach after all. Over the next few weeks, our relationship shifted from professional collaboration to something deeper. Sarah didn't care about the size of my bank account or the title on my business card. What mattered to her was the man behind the work, the one who cared deeply about his craft and the people he touched along the way. The grand opening of the new branch was supposed to mark a new chapter in my life, a celebration of resilience and success. Invitations went out to clients, partners, and close friends. Everything was meticulously planned: the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the catered hors d'oeuvres, and the carefully curated playlist. As guests began arriving, I stood near the entrance, greeting them with a smile that masked the nervous energy bubbling beneath the surface. This was more than just a business milestone. It was proof that I could rise above the chaos of my past. And then, like a storm cloud rolling in, Amelia appeared. She strode through the doors uninvited, clutching a bouquet of flowers so large it nearly obscured her face. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and without hesitation, she marched straight toward me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as heads turned to watch the unfolding spectacle. "I'm not leaving until you hear me out," she declared, thrusting the flowers into my arms. Her voice trembled, but there was a stubborn determination in her tone that silenced any attempt to interrupt. "I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but I can't let you move on without knowing how sorry I am. Please, just give me 5 minutes." For a moment, I froze, unsure of how to respond. The weight of her presence pressed down on me, dragging memories I'd worked so hard to bury back to the surface. Around us, conversation stalled, and the atmosphere grew tense. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing was happening. Even Sarah, who had been standing nearby, looked visibly shaken. But I refused to let Amelia disrupt the progress I'd made. Setting the flowers aside, I took a step back, creating physical and emotional distance between us. "You lost your chance," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You chose this path, Amelia. Now you have to live with the consequences." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pleaded, "Don't do this. Don't shut me out." But I couldn't and wouldn't go back. Turning away, I signaled for security to escort her out. As she left, the tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by murmurs of relief and curiosity. Though the incident cast a shadow over the event, it also reinforced everything I'd learned. Some bridges are better left burned. It had been months since the chaos with Amelia and Liz unraveled, but the scars of their betrayal lingered in ways I hadn't anticipated. While my life was finally finding its footing again, my business thriving, Sarah bringing light back into my world, I couldn't ignore the whispers still floating around about what had happened. People talked, as they always do, piecing together fragments of the truth to suit their own narratives. Some called me cold-hearted for cutting ties so abruptly. Others labeled Amelia and Liz as victims of circumstance. The gossip mill never stopped spinning, and though I tried to block it out, there were moments when the noise became deafening. That's why I decided to hold a small press conference, not because I owed anyone an explanation, but because I wanted to set the record straight once and for all. If people were going to talk, they might as well know the full story from the person who lived it. The venue was modest, a rented conference room at a local cafe, decorated minimally with a podium and a few chairs. It wasn't flashy or grandiose, it didn't need to be. This wasn't about spectacle, it was about closure. As I stood behind the podium, scanning the faces of reporters and curious onlookers, I felt a strange mix of calm and unease. For years, I'd carried the weight of anger, hurt, and regret, letting those emotions dictate how I responded to the people who wronged me. But today, I wasn't here to point fingers or fuel resentment. Today, I was here to reclaim my voice. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I know many of you have questions about what transpired between Amelia, Liz, and myself. And while I understand the fascination with drama, I want to make one thing clear. This isn't about revenge. It's about understanding. I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Amelia and I shared nearly a decade of our lives together. We built dreams, faced challenges, and grew in ways neither of us could have predicted. But somewhere along the way, doubt crept in, not just hers, but mine too. And unfortunately, we allowed someone else to exploit those doubts for their own gain. My eyes flickered briefly toward the cameras, imagining Liz watching from wherever she hid these days. Liz didn't just interfere in our relationship. She manipulated both of us, twisting truths until we no longer recognized ourselves or each other. The room fell silent, save for the faint scratching of pens against notepads. I could see some reporters leaning forward, eager to capture every word. Others exchanged skeptical glances, perhaps questioning whether I was being entirely truthful. But I pressed on, determined to leave nothing unsaid. I won't deny that I made mistakes. I trusted blindly, hoping love would conquer all. But sometimes, love isn't enough, not when it's poisoned by jealousy, insecurity, and manipulation. What happened between Amelia and me wasn't just a breakup, it was a lesson. A painful, unforgettable lesson about choosing the right person to share your life with. At this point, I introduced Sarah. She walked in quietly, her presence grounding me in a way I hadn't experienced before. Her smile was warm yet reserved, exuding the kind of authenticity that drew people in without demanding attention. As she took her seat beside me, I turned back to the audience. "This is Sarah," I said, my tone softening. "She came into my life during one of the darkest chapters I've ever faced. At first, I resisted letting her in. I was afraid of getting hurt again, of trusting the wrong person. But Sarah proved to me that not everyone comes with hidden agendas. She accepted me for who I am, flaws and all, and reminded me that true love doesn't demand perfection, it celebrates growth." I glanced at Sarah briefly, gratitude swelling in my chest. Turning back to the crowd, I added, "To anyone out there dealing with heartbreak, betrayal, or self-doubt, let my story serve as a reminder. Don't let the pain of your past dictate the possibilities of your future. Yes, people will disappoint you. Yes, relationships can shatter in ways you never imagined. But holding on to bitterness only prolongs the suffering. Choose wisely. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, challenge you, and genuinely care about your happiness, not their own ego." With that, I stepped away from the podium, signaling the end of my speech. Reporters clamored to ask follow-up questions, but I held up a hand, silencing them. "There's nothing more to say. Thank you for listening." As I exited the room, hand in hand with Sarah, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by the wreckage of my past. Instead, I was focused on building something new, something real. And if sharing my story helped even one person navigate their own struggles, then every moment of pain had been worth it.